looks like it's true then what Nigel Mansell says. The Silverstone crowd really is worth about half a second a lap.
1 light, 2 lights, 3 lights, 4 lights, 5 lights, and it's go!
Hello everyone, my name's Aaron and welcome to the 5 Red Lights. Today I'm reviewing the British Grand Prix. We're going to be talking about that incident between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. We're going to be talking the F1 sprint, and I'm going to rate every driver's weekend performance. Before we crack on though, I'd like you to consider liking the video if you enjoy it and subscribing to the channel if you're new here and you like what you find. Before I dive into that incident between Max and Lewis, let's kick things off with our 60-second race review. Lewis outstarted Max, who had taken the first sprint pole in F1 history. The pair battled round Abbey, Farm and Village and then again into Brooklands. Hamilton got a great run out of Luffield and dummied Max and went for a brave move into Copse. Max gave some space, Lewis waited as long as possible to back out, but as Max took the racing line, the pair collided. Max spun dramatically to the barrier, while Lewis survived, but now Charles Leclerc had the lead. A red flag came and a standing restart was ordered. Charles took the lead and held off Hamilton through the opening stint, while the home hero was slapped with a 10-second time penalty. The other home hero, Lando Norris, had jumped Valtteri Bottas and ran third. Sebastian Vettel recreated his Ferrari days by spinning when in combat with Fernando Alonso. Sergio Perez, coming from the back, was making some progress, while Helmut Marko called for race bans as he left the track halfway through the race. Hamilton served his penalty at his pit stop. Lando Norris dropped behind Bottas as he had a slow pit stop, and Hamilton rejoined in fourth after his penalty. He quickly disposed of Norris and he closed on Bottas, who didn't have the pace to catch Leclerc and so was instructed to let Lewis by. From 9 seconds behind with 12 laps to go, Lewis ran at a second a lap faster on the hard tyres to reel in his challenger. On lap 50, Lewis made the move on Charles at Copse corner and snatched the lead and subsequent victory. Red Bull furious, Mercedes and the British fans jubilant. The title fight is fully reignited, with an extra dumping of gasoline on it. So it finally happened, Max and Lewis collide. And it had been brewing, hadn't it? Because there'd been some near misses earlier on in the season, and finally at Copse corner, it happened. Now, the stage was set after the sprint race, and we'll come on to the sprint race in a little bit. And the way Max and Lewis attacked and defended against each other in that shaped the way that the Grand Prix itself was going to play out. Lewis knew he had to get past on the opening lap to make sure he gave himself every opportunity to win the race. Now, even if he'd got past, he may not still have won. Max might have still found a way past with strategy or with just better speed. Now, it's divided opinion and it's got a little bit toxic. First of all, the racist abuse is just absolutely unacceptable and it has no place in sport. It has no place in any walk of life. So those who have thrown those comments towards Lewis Hamilton should be ashamed of themselves. And I really hope they have a good look in the mirror and consider how they interact with other people, whether it be face-to-face or online. So, let's get a few questions out of the way first. Was Hamilton alongside? Yes. Was he far enough alongside to make the move into Copse corner? That's debatable. Depends on how you see it. Should he have backed out sooner? Probably, because there was still the opportunity into Stowe corner, but you have to follow through Maggots and Beckett's. Now, any incident does take two to tangle, and Max should also bear some of the responsibility for this. He has set a precedent for aggressive attacking moves, and especially on the opening lap. Just look at some of his driving from Imola and Catalonia. Lewis gave way in Spain, avoiding an incident, and Verstappen kind of outmuscled Hamilton because he had the better position on that day. But in Britain at Silverstone, Lewis knew that he had to get in front. Now, it's a heavy impact, of course, and there's a lot that can be done. Max could have taken a wider arc through the corner. Lewis could have backed out sooner. Heavy fuel, split-second decisions. It's hard to really put ourselves in that position. Now, I think it's 60-40 Lewis's fault because he is the car attempting the overtake and it's kind of your responsibility not to crash into the person you're trying to overtake. But then you can also make a case for it being a complete racing incident because they're racing at the end of the day. They They're racing drivers and they know the risks. And anyone who suggests that Lewis was trying to do that on purpose needs to give their head a wobble, because he really, really didn't. Just go and look at Senna versus Prost, Suzuka 1990. That is deliberate. Look at some of the things that Schumacher did. Jerez 97. That was deliberate. I'll rest my case. The penalty, for me, was just about fair, even if it was a touch lenient. I had a look through the FIA sporting regulations regarding the incidents during the race, and it doesn't actually define a collision itself. It just describes any on-track incident. So it then becomes the discretion of the stewards, with the aid of the driver steward, as to what is the appropriate penalty to apply. Now, of course, when they're deliberating this, they have to take a lot of things into account. And they can't possibly know that Hamilton's going to go on and win the race when they apply that penalty. So suggesting that the penalty was not hard enough is a bit of a flimsy argument. I think a 10-second penalty was a good penalty if you were Mercedes, but a drive-through through the pit lane would have also been fair, because he'd have had to take it within 3 laps. So after the restart, it'd have been, lap 7? He'd have dropped probably to the back. He might have been a bit more aggressive going up against Leclerc, and then you'd have seen some sort of fight back. Of course, he probably wouldn't have won the race from there. But even with a 10-second time penalty, you think it's going to be very difficult to win the race, considering he'd lost position to Norris, Bottas and Leclerc. Now, he certainly would have taken big points out of Verstappen's lead, even if he hadn't won the race. But the fact that he's gone on and won the race, even having served a 10-second time penalty, is fantastic. Red Bull themselves have experienced this, having their driver serve a penalty but still go on to win the race. Now, of course, Mark Webber in 2009 didn't punt someone off the track, but he did bang wheels, or bang side pod, with Rubens Barrichello at the Nürburgring, served his drive-through penalty and made up that time to win the race. It actually was his first Grand Prix win. That day, Mark was the fastest man on the track. Yesterday, Lewis on the hard tyres was faster than anybody else. So by this point he's served his penalty. He's taken the pain. Okay, the Mercedes were able to do a good job of nullifying some of it, but I think even if he'd taken it earlier, he would have had the pace, the way that car was set up, to get past most of the cars in front of him. He might have had a problem with getting past Perez, but that's just the way the cookie crumbled for Mercedes and for Red Bull. The fact that he was a second a lap faster at times than Charles Leclerc doesn't reflect on Charles' ability, it reflects on the difference between their machines. Mercedes had that car set up to maximise the straight line speed, and the thing is, with the turbo hybrid era and the aerodynamics the way they are, straight line speed is massively important at Silverstone rather than pure aerodynamic performance. So for Lewis to go on and win that race was just spectacular. Absolutely the drive of a 7-time world champion. For the incident itself, Max made his one move, but Lewis still found a Mercedes-sized space on the inside. And then neither of them wanted to budge. And that's racing. I kind of found Red Bull's response to the incident way over the top, fueled by the emotion of the battle, of course. But for some of the things that Christian Horner was coming out with, it was just, he was calling Lewis desperate, but he was kind of being a bit pathetic and a bit childish at times. Calling Lewis a dirty driver, that's grossly unfair, as Lewis has no real record of dirty driving. You can question some drivers' application within wheel-to-wheel combat or other facets of their game, but Lewis, I don't think you can hold anything like that against him. He's always been fair. He's had his share of tangles and incidents. Just look at his 2011 season. It was a bit scruffy. But everyone's gone through that. Vettel's gone through it. Schumacher went through it. Senna went through it. Verstappen has gone through it. No one's perfect. And Hamilton certainly is not a dirty driver. And as for Helmut Marko, he needs to go and look himself in the mirror, because calling for a race ban, I'm sorry, but we've seen Red Bull drivers do exactly the same sometimes a touch worse, and yeah, well, I think whatever Helmut Marko says, we should just take with a big dollop of salt. Just the ramblings of an old man, unfortunately. As for Max himself, calling Lewis disrespectful and unsporting, he needs a reality check. Welcome to the big boy fight, Max. Lewis has every right to celebrate a win, as does Max. And it's just a shame that Red Bull aren't able to take this in a certain amount of good grace and then come back fighting in Hungary. Okay, let's talk about the historic moment of the first ever F1 sprint. And of course, we had the qualifying session on Friday, and that was great because it gave Friday some meaning. It wasn't, okay, we've had practice, look at the times, who's doing what. You can't really always read into that, but it gave us a representative. It made FP1 really representative because the teams had to get on top of what they were doing, and then qualifying in the evening was really fun. And these are almost party events. They're like festivals. If you go to Glastonbury or Reading and Leeds, they don't just start the music on a Saturday afternoon. There's music on a Friday because people take the weekend and they want to go and enjoy it. So, if people can only get to a race on a Friday, then they get something for their money. They don't just see cars driving around. Imagine it rains on the Friday. They're still going to qualify unless it's absolutely torrential. So you get something. You get some meaningful action on the Friday. And I think Friday qualifying, which then counts towards something, not like the aggregate or two-phase qualifying they've done in the past, I think that really works. That's a big win for Formula One and for the TV companies. It helps get more people in because there's something extra to watch. There's a reason to tune in on a Friday evening, or Friday evening would be perfect because everyone can be home from work then and get maximum TV audience. And also people who are in the town or city or country where the race is being held, they can get there too. You can get a bigger audience on a Friday afternoon. So that is a really good, positive outcome for Formula One. How you feel the Saturday afternoon is then up for debate. Now, we had the F1 sprint this time. It was fun for the opening laps with drivers fighting incredibly hard for position. The battle between Max and Lewis was super intense and it set the stage for the Grand Prix. But things kind of soon settled down as it was tough to follow around Silverstone, which was a shame. I had high hopes for it being quite exciting with lots of DRS overtakes and whatnot. It helped shape the opening to the Grand Prix because of the Max and Lewis battle, and they had a chance to kind of scout each other. And if Lewis hadn't lost the lead at the start, he would never have known that Max would have gone so defensive on the Wellington straight. So that's kind of fun. It gives a second opportunity to the car behind to make that overtake. And Lewis, it told him that he had to be in front come race day because he just couldn't live with the Red Bull if it stayed in front. And that's what led to the Cops Corner incident. He also learned that he would get that run out of Luffield if he did it correctly, and that going for the outside line, unless he had a stupidly good run on the Red Bull, was not the way to go. He had to get out the inside, which is why he dummied him. Excellent racecraft. Just a shame it ended in contact. Fernando Alonso, he was the star of the show. He was epic on the opening lap. He started 11th? Yeah, it must have been 11th because he was on the left-hand side of the grid. And he was up to 5th halfway around the lap. I was too busy trying to calm down when they got to Stowe Corner and hoping that Lewis would then catch Max and make a real fist of it. And then you got... so you had Max go round, you had Lewis, then Bottas, and then Leclerc. And then all of a sudden there's this blue Alpine out of nowhere. I was like, what is Alonso doing there? Ridiculous. What a start though. The on-board is super fun. It takes me back to his... If you have a look for it, 2011 Spanish Grand Prix. Alonso's starting 4th. He's got Hamilton in 3rd alongside him. The Red Bulls are on the front row, Vettel and Webber. And Alonso this is when they had the KERS system, when they had to push the button. He just went full send. And he's ducking around for slipstream and dives down the inside. Spanish Grand Prix, crowd goes mad. This one, not quite the same, but he still had to position his car, be really smart with what he was doing, avoid the contact. And how often do we see cars get a little bit too close on the opening lap and they tangle, wheels go flying, cars go spinning round. But it was excellent from Fernando and stunning performance. Now, unfortunately, he couldn't quite hold on to that 5th place. He did drop down to P7. And aside from the spin for Sergio Perez, everyone ended up starting kind of where they would have anyway. So it kind of started really good, and then it just kind of dropped down in terms of excitement levels, which was a shame. Not quite what Formula 1 were hoping for. It was good to try it out. It was really good to see how it looks, how it feels, the way the scheduling would work. Hopefully Formula 1 can make some tweaks to how it works in Italy. I've heard a lot of suggestions about only using the soft tyre or a specific soft sprint tyre. I would actually suggest that the sprint uses like an unbranded Pirelli compound, so any one of the range. And the teams and drivers have no idea what they're going to be using, so it's kept a complete secret. And then the race is sort of 12 to 15 laps. 17 was a touch too long, I thought. Now, if you did it this way, and then I've heard other people say that the engineers can't talk to the drivers, they've just got to be left to go on with it. That would work in this situation as well, because the drivers then have to work out how best to bring the tyres in. Do they go hard and risk them coming up to temperature really quickly and then falling off a cliff? Or do they bring them in slowly and risk not ever getting the temperature in them? Because then you might find someone drive slowly and then they lose places. If Verstappen can't get the tyres in the window after taking the lead, Hamilton's going to breeze back past him, and that's going to make great TV. That's going to make great racing, because they're trying to work it out as they're going. You never know. You might see a Ferrari which is just able to light its tyres up really nicely, come through, and all of a sudden it looks like he's racing 0% AI on the F1 game. You'll get something random, and that's because there's the element of unknown. You take away that security net for the teams and the drivers. Now, obviously, DRS trains were a worry, and where it could be hard to follow, perhaps DRS zones being increased. So perhaps at Silverstone, obviously you've got the Wellington Straight and the Hangar Straight have DRS, but you could potentially have some DRS on the Pit Straight, especially given the cars create so much downforce. You could possibly have DRS out of Luffield. It might be a little bit tight into Copse, but then you'd cut the DRS zone early maybe. It might even make it a bit more of a stop. They might have to get on the brakes, and it's a little bit more risky. But that obviously, having seen the incident with Max and Lewis, in retrospect, might be a touch too far. But there's lots of things that F1 can do with this. It's really good that they're trying these things, and let's see where they go with it. It's quite exciting seeing them try it and not just throw it at us and go, well, it doesn't work, you're stuck with it now, or we have to backtrack and they have to have egg on their face. No one wants that. So they're doing it in the right way, and let's see how they approach it in Italy. Okay, so let's review everyone's race and how it panned out. I'm going to be rating the drivers for the first time this season, and I'm going to be doing this moving forward. I'm going to rate them out of 5 stars, potentially 0 stars being the lowest, but hopefully just half a star only ever being the lowest, and 5 stars being the highest. So let's start off with the race winner, Lewis Hamilton. So it was first place for Lewis. He was aggressive at the start, knowing he had to get past the Red Bull of Verstappen. He survived the collision and was superb thereafter. Managed his race behind Leclerc after the restart, and came through on the hard tyres with superb pace to win the race. His rating, 4.5 stars. Valtteri Bottas finished in 3rd place, and he should have won this race, but again he got stuck after losing places at the start. Then he didn't have nearly enough pace to close down Charles Leclerc after their stops, so Valtteri gets 2.5 stars. Max Verstappen held off the initial fight from Lewis, but lost sight of the bigger picture in his battle approaching Cop's corner. Ended up out of the race, and a massive chunk of his championship lead sliced away. 1.5 stars. Sergio Perez. A nightmare for Sergio, which started on Saturday in the sprint with his spin, and he made some good early progress, but once he got stuck behind the AlphaTauri of Pierre Gasly, his race faltered. He did a good job in taking the fastest lap, so Sergio scores 1 star. Lando Norris, he lacked pace on the mediums compared to the Ferrari, otherwise a win could potentially have been possible. The slow stop then cost him a battle for the podium. Honestly, I think he would have hung on against Bottas, having held him off early on as well. Maturity against Lewis, not to fight that one too hard and then lose time because of it. I scored Lando's race at 3.5 stars. Daniel Ricciardo. P5 represents progress for the Australian. He spoke of the battle with Sainz allowing him to get comfortable with the car in the heat of battle. Much more consistent performance through each session for Daniel Rick, and I rate his performance at 3 stars. Charles Leclerc. A stunning drive, having inherited the lead from the restart. He deserved the podium, and on another day, the win would have been his. Ferrari, give this boy a proper car. I rate Charles' performance as 5 stars. Carlos Sainz. Solid pace, and he made the tyres last really well to reach P2 ahead of his stop, and then his race was undone by a slow pit stop. He could have done a lot better in qualifying, but P6 is still a good result for Carlos and for Ferrari. I rate Carlos' performance as 4 stars. Fernando Alonso, the star of the sprint, and he held on for P7 in the race, having started there on Sunday. Fernando looking much more at home in his comeback now. Could he really still be a title contender if the car is right? I rate Fernando's performance as 3.5 stars. Esteban Ocon. It was good to see Esteban pick up some points, but he was shaded massively by his teammate. A quiet weekend for Esteban, really. I rate his performance as 2.5 stars. Sebastian Vettel. It started well. He was high up in the sprint finishing order, but then when battling with Fernando Alonso at the restart in the race, he spun and ended up with a DNF. Was he just in a green Ferrari this weekend? I rate Sebastian's performance as 1.5 stars. Lance Stroll. An unheralded performance from Lance as he struggled out of Q1 and then bagged P8 in the race. He's growing in maturity and his skill is always increasing for the young Canadian. I rate his performance as 3 stars. Pierre Gasly. A quiet weekend for Pierre. He failed to make Q3 or pick up any points. He got stuck behind Raikkonen and that kind of ruined his race. I rate his performance as 2 stars. Yuki Tsunoda. A quiet weekend was probably what Yuki needed. No crashes or major moments, and he did pick up the final point. I rate Yuki's performance as 2 stars. George Russell. Outstanding qualifying. He made the Silverstone crowd roar like we haven't heard in over a year. And it was unfortunate that he picked up a 3-place grid drop after contact with Sainz. Put that boy in a Merc and he will fly. I rate George's performance as 3 stars. Nicholas Latifi. Overshadowed by George again, but a reliable pair of hands for Williams. He picked up some damage early on and he just managed his car to 14th at the flag. I rate Nicholas's performance as 2 stars. Antonio Giovinazzi. P13, he again beat Kimi in qualifying, but his race pace was kind of nowhere, and that's how he ended up in 13th and kind of nowhere. I rate Antonio's performance as 2 stars. Kimi Raikkonen. Lacking the 1-lap pace that he had early in his career, but he showcased his razor-sharp racecraft against Sergio Perez. Then he had a scruffy incident with the Mexican at Club Corner, which spoilt his race. I rate Kimi's performance as 2 stars. And finally, the 2 Haas boys. They finished last and second last, but incredibly, it was Mazepin beating Schumacher. Given what they have to drive and their lack of experience, I give both drivers 2 stars. There are my thoughts on the British Grand Prix and the incident between Max and Lewis. How will things play out in Hungary? I think Red Bull and Max are going to come back swinging, and I think Max is going to be more aggressive than ever. I can see there being more contact at the outside of turn 2. Now whoever comes out on top in that will gain a significant psychological advantage. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the race, and for Christ's sake, keep it respectful. Thanks for watching. My name's Aaron. This has been the 5 Red Lights, and when the 5 Red Lights go out next time, I'll see you there. Bye for now.